So hello everybody and welcome back to Kagyu Samyuzong Edinburgh for the second of the 4 preliminary foundations or 4 ways of turning the mind to Dharma. And because each section or each part of these is split into 2, we're now on the second part of death, impermanence, change. And so we're going to be continuing after the first part, which we did last time, and finish that part of it off today. So, before we start, let's just say the prayers to put our minds and bodies in the right state, especially our minds. So we will start with the Refuge Prayer, and I'll say that first in English, and then we can say it 2 times in the Tibetan phonetic, so making 3 times in all. And then let's say the prayer to the Llama, and then we'll say the prayer to the lineage, both of which we'll just say 1 time. Okay. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the noblest Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the virtue generated by the practice of generosity and other virtues, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. Sanjay Chutang Suji Chonam La Changcho Padu Dani Chapsunji Dagi Jin Suji Pe Sonamji Drola Pinche Sanjay Do Parsho Sanjay Chutang Suji Chonam La Changcho Padu Dani Chapsunji Dagi Jinso Jipe Sanamji Dola Pinche Sanjay Parsho. So the prayer to the root Lama, I'll say that first in the Tibetan and then we can say it together in English. Paden sawe lama rinpoche, dagi chiwo pende de shukla, katrin chimpo goni jisungte, kusun chuchi ngurup satu so. Glorious, precious root Lama, above my head on a lotus moon seat, you care for me with great kindness. Please bestow the siddhis of body, speech, and mind. And then the lineage prayer. Great Vajradharati Lunaro Marpa Mila Dharma Lord Gampopa, knower of the 3 times, omniscient Karmapa, holders of the 4 elder and 8 younger lineages, Drikontaklung and the Salpa, glorious Drukpa, and so forth, masters of the profound path of Mahamudra, to the Dakpo instruction lineage, the peerless protectors of wanderers. Kagyu Lamas, I supplicate you, I uphold your lineage, grant the blessings of your liberating lives, just as revulsion is taught to be the legs of meditation. This meditator clings not to food and riches, and has severed the ties to this life. Grant your blessings for detachment from honor and gain. Just as devotion is taught to be the head of meditation, this meditator constantly prays to the Lama who opens the vault of pith instructions, grant your blessings for uncontrived devotion to well forth. Just as non-distraction is taught to be the body of meditation, this meditator simply remains without altering the fresh essence of whatever thought arises. Grant your blessings for parting from the concept of meditation. Just as thought is taught to be in essence Dharmakaya, for this meditator unhindered manifestation dawns. Nothing whatsoever dawning as whatever may be. Grant your blessings to realize inseparable samsara nirvana. May I never in future lives part from authentic lamas and embracing ever the glory of Dharma. May I perfect the qualities of the levels and paths and thus swiftly attain the state of Vajradhara. State of Vajradhara. So now we'll continue with our topic for today, which is the change, impermanence, life and death. And before we start, we should say the root text. And before we start the root text of the death and impermanence, we should say the part that we've already done, which is the difficulty of getting a precious human life. So we'll just say it in English, and then we'll say it in the Tibetan phonetics, and then we'll say the one for death and impermanence. And when you're doing your practice at home, that's what you do, and you just add on until you've got all four. So the first meditation topic concerns the difficulty of getting a fully endowed human life. First meditation topic concerns the precious human life endowed with every freedom and asset. It is difficult to get and can be easily destroyed. So now is the time to make it meaningful. And in the Tibetan, Tangpo gomcha dalcho rinchendi, topka jikla tare tanyurcha. So very succinct, isn't it? And then death and impermanence. So secondly, the universe and everything that lives therein is impermanent, particularly the lives of beings, which are like water bubbles. The time of death is uncertain, and when you die, you will become a corpse. Dharma will help you at that time. Therefore, practice it diligently now. And in the Tibetan, Nirpana chu tamche mitaching, gusu roe seso chuotra, namchi chame shitse rurujor, tela chichi penched sampedrup. Okay, such a wealth of meaning in those short phrases. So, in the previous session, you were meant to be working with the subtopics of death and impermanence, which you should have been doing in the last few weeks, which is the universe, how the universe is impermanent. And then the second one, the inhabitants of the universe, all the beings that live in the universe. And the third topic, all the countless beings that have died, of all types of beings that have died throughout beginningless time. And then the fourth one, the many causes of death, so many causes of death. So now we're moving on to the second part of death and impermanence. And I think, before we carry on, I think it's good to just sort of think, why do we have to look at it so in such detail? Why is it good to look at death and impermanence? If you remember, the Buddha said, if you only had one topic on which to meditate, make it impermanence. I think the main point is to really give us a reality check, because although we know that things change and that we're going to die, we don't behave as if that's the case. We just kind of get lost in distractions. And it's so easy to do, especially these days when there's so much around to distract us, and it's very easy to just kind of step out of reality and just live in La-La land, which is constantly being plugged to us, via social media, via the media in general, TV, films, all this escapism from how things really are. So we forget, we kind of behave as if it's not true. Think of like in the golden age of Hollywood, like in I don't know if you ever have watched old films like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers type films, Hollywood musicals, they're amazing, they're wonderful. But they were made during the Great Depression, when people didn't have 2 pennies to rub, dimes to rub together, and there was such poverty and starvation, and especially in rural areas, people were actually starving in not only in America, but we think of America as being so rich, and that's how it's portrayed, isn't it, in the films, even in those days. In fact, especially in those days, they're always filmed in luxurious locations, like top-class hotels or whatever, and yet they're so far removed from the reality that people were living in. And of course, people probably needed a break from that, from the harshness of the reality. And I guess, we do it. We're not living maybe in such harsh times here in the UK right now, but we're still having to deal with the pandemic and people dying. Thankfully, not as much as it was, but then in other parts of the world, this is still raging. So, there's always a lot of suffering. And so there's always a need for escapism, and maybe a little bit is okay, just to take the edge off sometimes. But when you get totally lost in it, that's when the trouble starts. Then you get kind of completely removed from what's actually happening, which means that you're unable to do anything about it, because you are living in La-La land. So how can you change anything? But change, we think of change, and maybe we feel scared of change or whatever, but change is neither good nor bad. It's whatever we make it, however we look at it. Without change, there would be, what's the opposite of change? Would be stasis, stagnation. There'd be no growth. And if you were suffering and then you got stuck in the suffering, there'd be no end to the suffering. So, because things change, because everything is impermanent, it means that everything can grow. Everything is constantly changing, and that's great, because it gives us the opportunity to transform for the better. Of course, we can also transform for the worse, but that's our choice. So it's life, isn't it? It's giving the opportunity to this is what the Dharma is all about, the opportunity to relinquish what's our mind poisons, our mind distractions, our things that are not good, that we need to get rid of, and to adopt, cultivate what's good and what's going to help us and help us help others. This is what the Dharma is all about. And none of that would be possible if there was no change, if things were just stuck. So I think we should embrace change and embrace life, embrace change, embrace death, because that's only a stepping point to the next life or another cosmic address. We don't know, we may not come back to Earth, but it's not a blank space, it's not a dead end. There's another part of the journey, and it's another part of the cycle. So if we look like that at change and impermanence and death as just being steps along the journey, the direction we take is largely up to us, which is why we're studying and reflecting on the Dharma. So I think it's such a positive topic, really. Anyway, so yeah, I think if we see it in that way and we look at it with open eyes and with an open mind and open hearts, you have to take it on board in your heart as well, and that's where the meditation comes in, through experience, not just intellect. You need both. And then when you sort of see things how they really are, and you're not kind of trying to brush things under the carpet or be in denial, when you actually look at things how they honestly are, then you find that the amazing system that we have, this wonderful opportunity in recycling and transformation, and then you see the joy in it and the opportunity. It's not a fearful thing. You can approach it with kind of eagerness and wanting to engage, I think acceptance is also important, when you accept the way things are and not constantly fighting against it. I don't want this, I don't want that, but just accept in a good way. I don't mean be like a doormat, I mean be just accepting of the way things are and see the beauty and of this whole system and the whole creation. It's just amazing. Anyway, so let's look at what happens now. We're going to make it a bit more we'll look at it from a very personal point of view, and we're going to look at what actually happens when we die, what actually happens at the hour of death. So let's go into it bravely and have a good look. Of course, we may be loving life, and even if we don't exactly love life, it's difficult. Death is not easy because we're habituated to having this body and having this mind together. They're kind of both together, aren't they? You could almost like the mind is inhabiting this body. The body doesn't move on its own. It has to be directed by the mind. If I want to pick my hand up, the brain has to tell me that. It's not actually the brain, it's the mind that's using the brain, because the brain is also part of the body's machinery, you could say, the physical body. But the thoughts that come into the brain of the mind, they're not physical. Thoughts are invisible, aren't they? You cannot catch a thought. You can see where it's been by looking at the brain. Maybe you can sort of detect some sort of graph of kind of activity, but you can't actually see the thought. So that's our consciousness, our mind uses our body to do the actions of whatever we do in this particular lifetime. But then when it comes time for us to die, that's when the mind, consciousness leaves the body. And that's what's difficult and can be painful and confusing, and it can even be tormented. It depends, if we look at death and impermanence now and prepare ourselves through the Dharma, then our experience will be so much better. So otherwise, people cling on to life for dear life, don't they? They cling on for dear life. And if we've had a very negative life, we've led a very negative life, say we've done lots of bad things in our life, and we've never kind of confessed or counteracted it, we've never come to terms with our negative actions, we've never even admitted them. And we're not talking here about, you might have done a lot of negative actions, maybe even killed beings, but never got caught in terms of the legal system. You may have got away with it. But there's no getting away with it karmically. And that imprints itself on our consciousness, and that's what our experience will be in this life and as we die, and taking it into the next life. And we'll go through this in more detail when we come on to the next topic, which is karma. But as I've said before, all of them are part of the same understanding, and there's no actual division between these four topics, but we're just kind of making that, or it's been made for us by the holy Lamas, Rinchen Khandro, Milarepa. So So in order for us to get a grasp of understanding how this works. So if a person has done a lot of harmful deeds in this life and had no remorse for them, and is still, the mind is still in that kind of hellish state, and so when they come to die, you can guess where they might be going. But before they die, so just after they die, there's this kind of in-between stage before they kind of know what their next type of existence will be. They're in what we call the Bardo. This is the in-between stage. It's kind of, it depends what state our mind is in at the time of death as to how we experience the Bardo. So if we have a mind completely in a negative, horrible state, then the appearances in the Bardo will be like that. And it's said, to get a sort of some understanding of how it is, it's said to be something like being in last night's dream, in our dream world. And, mostly, for the most part, whatever we dream, we don't have any control over, do we? We might be having a nightmare, or we could be having a nice dream, but it's very difficult to have any kind of control over it. There are practices that you can do. In the Dharma, there's dream yoga, for example. But mostly, we don't have any control over our dreams, and we're kind of at the mercy of whatever stuff is going on in our head. Maybe we watched something on TV that made us dream of something, or we behaved in a certain way that day, or somebody said something to us, and it's playing in our mind, and then it shows itself in a dream through which we have no control. And it is said that the Bardo is similar to that. It seems very real. It is kind of real in as much as anything is real, because it's still our mind, it's still our consciousness. We don't have the body, just as in our dreams we're not actually using our physical body, but we have still the dream body, don't we? We still have a sense of having a body. And so, and that is also the case in the Bardo, this kind of Bardo body. And it's probably something like the last body that we had in the last life that we've just checked out of, because that's still uppermost in our mind. So if we've led a very negative life and done lots of harmful things, then that will greatly influence the way we die. In the Bardo, and things can look extremely fearful and terrifying, tormenting, and also beyond the Bardo when we take another rebirth. Of course, if we've led a good life, if we've been quite a positive, and actually there's another sort of stage between the worst kind of life and the best kind of life. There's a sort of middle one, which is kind of like, we've been okay, we've not done anything horrible, but maybe we haven't really done anything that great either, and we haven't really come into contact with the Dharma, or we've just been a bit lazy, or just not interested in how things are, just a bit kind of not very diligent, a bit sort of ignorant really, but not maybe not aggressive or anything like that, but just sort of not really looked into things, not had any kind of oomph, just sort of tootling along. So that's kind of then we're in a state of ignorance more. Well, you could say the first example of the person who's done a lot of horrible things, that's really aggression, isn't it? A state of aggression. And then this middle one is the state of ignorance. Not a horrible person, but just not really tuned in. And so that experience of the Bardo will maybe not be so terrifying, but it would be, I think, a state of confusion and bewilderment, because we've not had any preparation or developed any understanding of what's happening. So, we might feel very lost and confused. I think that would be more that kind of experience. But then the third type of person, of course you could Also, if you had a lot of desire, then that you would probably experience that kind of thing, the sort of the greed type of things, and not having what you want and not being able to take with you what you want. So how we are in our life will influence how we are in our death. And the three root causes of suffering in samsara are hatred and aggression, too much grasping and desire, and then the basic ignorance from which the other two sprout. So that can carry on. But then if we come into contact with the Dharma, and if we really looked into it, then we have some preparation. We're not at the mercy of misunderstandings. We have some understanding. We may not understand everything, but we've gone into it. We're prepared. And we're looking at things in a frank and honest way. And so then our experience in the Bardo will be completely different, because it won't be totally unfamiliar. We will expect it to be something like that. Also, if we've really gone into the Dharma and we've done the practice of dream yoga, that's where you kind of you start to have some control of your dreams. You know when you're dreaming, basically. You become aware of your dreaming. That's the first step, is to know that you're dreaming. And then when you know that you're dreaming and you're still in the dream, then you can still influence the outcome of that dream. So imagine, for example, you have a very common dream of falling or something, and then instead of falling, you could say, well, I think actually I'll float now, and you could just float. You know that you're dreaming, so you can change it. Or you can decide, well, I'm going to fall, but instead of just banging onto the earth, I'm going to go through into the earth. And, anything's possible in a dream, isn't it? And so you have some control over it. Now, it's not easy to do. It takes a lot of practice, but it's definitely possible. But even without training in dream yoga, you can still have some more realistic idea of how the Bardo might be, and also to see it as it can be an opportunity, because if you die well, if you die in a calm space and have some idea of what's coming, then you're not going to be so kind of perturbed by what's happening, and you can look towards the clear light. In any case, whatever way you go, if you're calm and peaceful, the chances are that your Bardo experience will be that, and then your next life, wherever and whatever that may be, will also be according to that calm, peaceful state of mind. So, I think if that's a very sort of general idea of what happens, and then if we think of our own death and we practice the Dharma now, then it will spur us on to meditate on this subject of death and impermanence. And this is why the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas think it's so important, because it changes not just our life now, but the lives to come. So it's hugely important. And then when the time does come, we can experience it without fear. We can't say we want to die or something like that, but when the time comes, we'll be habituated to, well, this is what happens, this is natural, I'm going to make the most of it. Just like we try to make the most of our lives, why? So you can make the most of your death as well. Use it. It's an opportunity. But in order to have that, we need to really build up our faith and understanding and put our trust in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. Because when that is really genuine, that's where our minds are at. We don't have to try. We've already done all that during our life. It's not the time to do it is now. When we have our strength and our energy, our willpower, diligence, now when we can cultivate these good qualities and the understanding, then we will be habituated to that. So when we're on our deathbed, we're not going to have that much strength and energy, but we'll be habituated to that. It will be natural for us to think in that way, to put our trust in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and to recognize it. When the signs occur, we see things for what they are. So if we do the practice now, then we establish the habits. You could say it's, in terms of modern science, you could say we kind of establish the neural pathways, the paths most trodden in our brain and for our mind, the way our mind works and travels, so that when we're at that moment of death, we will automatically be going in the right direction for us, whereas if we leave it until it's too late, then it is too late. So that's why they say it's the most important practice, because now is the time to do it. Whenever now is for you, that's the time to do it. So that means practicing by study, by meditation, by applying it, by noticing, by observation in your life, seeing how it works, testing it for yourself, so you're not just believing it like some sort of fairy story, but because you can see that it makes logical sense, because you've studied it, you looked into it in your own way, and you can see in the world how it works. There's something I'd like to read you, actually, just a little quote from My Perfect Teacher, which we mentioned in the last session. I'm going to just get my glasses on for this, the print's a bit small. And so Khatro Rinpoche says, however, just to meditate on death will not suffice. The only thing of any use at the moment of death is the Dharma. So you also need to encourage yourself to practice in an authentic way, never slipping into forgetfulness or loss of vigilance, remembering always that the activities of samsara, of the worldly life, are transient and without the slightest meaning. In essence, this conjunction of body and mind is impermanent, so do not count on it as your own. It is only on loan. I really like that idea of it being on loan. It's kind of like, a bit like if you've rented a car or something and then you'd have to take the car back. It was just on loan. So that's how the body is in a way, So then the second topic that we can look into is what happens after death in the Bardo state. What actually happens? Now, what happens is the same for every being. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you're the most powerful ruler in the world. You can't take anything with you when you go. I remember when I was a child growing up, there was a singer called Eartha Kitt, and she had this song, and she used to sing, if I can't take it with me when I go, I just ain't gonna go. I'm afraid, Eartha, that's not how it works. So it's funny, I can remember lyrics from when I was a little kid. I think we all are a bit like that, isn't it? So, so you cannot take anything. It doesn't matter what you have, how many possessions you have, how many riches you have, what kind of house you live in, what you wear, what gold you might have amassed throughout your life, all the things that you've worked hard to possess. None of it's coming with you. Also, however beautiful you are or handsome you might be, maybe you've not only had natural beauty or or handsomeness, but you've worked really hard to keep it and had lots of plastic surgery and done so many things and spent a fortune trying to sort of hang on to this beauty or youth or whatever, you're going to be a corpse like everyone else. Maybe with a bit more plastic, a bit less biodegradable, let's say. But apart from the plastic, we all disintegrate into dust. There's another good reason for not having plastic surgery, not adding more pollution to the earth. So that when we die, our mind will be in the Bardo, between our last life and the one to come, whatever that's going to be. We're in this kind of in-between stage. And at that time, the mind is powerless. It can only, whatever good habits we've inculcated will influence it. And likewise, whatever negative habits will also influence it. But basically, it doesn't have the will then, that point, after we've died, it doesn't have the will. It's just like a leaf blowing around on the winds of karma, our past actions, how we've acted in the previous lifetimes, especially the last one. And that's what dictates what's going to happen to it. It's not in our control. Now it's in our control. Now when we can act, and according to the Dharma and what we've come to understand, that's when we're in control. But in the Bardo, no. We just are on the winds of our karma, so if our actions were good, then the outcome will be better than if we'd acted negatively. So yes, like a leaf or a feather drifting about on the winds of karma. And it said that it is like being in a dream without any control over our mind or body. Therefore, it's now, while we do have control over our mind and body, that we can accrue good actions, good karma, what we'd call positive karma. And then the inevitable outcome of that will be favorable. Just as if we've done many bad things and we have accrued negative karma, the inevitable outcome of that will be a negative outcome. But in the Bardo is not when this is decided. We're deciding it now in this life, when we have responsibility for our actions. That's when we have some control. In the Bardo, it's too late. The habits have already been set, the pathway has already been made, and that's the way you're going. So now is the time to practice. So, if we can act in accordance with the Dharma now and accrue the positive karma, that will definitely result in favorable conditions, not only in this life, but in future lives. The karma is not mistaken ever. It's cause and result, cause and effect. And in order to help us, if we look at the life of the Buddha and the life of the great masters, we have these amazing blueprints of how to act. Look how they acted, look what they did. You know, nobody becomes enlightened by accident. It takes courage, it takes willpower, it takes diligence and authenticity. You can't fool it. You can't just sort of, oh, I'm a Buddhist. And that's not enough to call yourself a Buddhist. Anyone can say that. Do you follow the teachings of the Buddha? Do you follow as best you can the lives of those who have gone before you, to see what they did and how they did it and translate that into your own life? Of course, you do it in your own way, you know. Everybody has their own path. But the map of where, you know, you can say the map is very, very similar. The main points. In fact, let's have a look at some of them, like the masters, for example, the masters in our own lineage, such as Marpa the translator. Marpa Latsao, that we call him the translator, because he was one of the first Tibetans to go to India. Why? To receive the Dharma, to search out. He knew that the great Panditas, the great Indian yogis, the teachers were from India. This is some time after the Buddha. And so that's why he went, and that was no mean feat, because to go from Tibet to India, even now, is not exactly easy, but in those days was really difficult. You couldn't just hop on a plane. You had to travel a long way and in very harsh circumstances, and lots of encounters with people you wouldn't really want to encounter, a lot of bandits along the way. You had to get a lot of resources together. You had to get gold and stuff together in order to travel that kind of distance. It took a long time to get there. And you have to go through many physical dangers. Finally, when you get there, when Marpa got there, then he met his teachers, Milarepa and others, and he took teachings of them. He was there for many years. It wasn't just going for like a couple of months. He was there for many years, and then he came back with of course he had to learn the language as well, and then he came back, and then he had to translate everything into Tibetan, and then he went back again because he wanted to get more teachings, and then again 3 times he did that in his lifetime, and he became enlightened, and he helped so many others become enlightened as well. He brought it to Tibet. And he had many students. He was quite a character, Marpa, very tough. And his main student was Milarepa. The thing about Milarepa is that he had all this negative karma because he was trying to get his heritage back, his land and everything that for his mother, and so he did a lot of very negative things, which included killing people. When they were in the house, he caused the house to collapse on them. So he had terrible karma, but because he met Marpa and he was able to overcome all that negative karma in one lifetime, and then he all the negative things that he'd done were the slate was wiped clean because of all the practice that he did and all the good that he did. So even the worst things can be nullified by practicing the Dharma wholeheartedly, authentically, genuinely, and with great diligence and determination. And so he went to live in the mountains and in caves, and he lived the life of a yogi, and he was one-pointed in his practice for the rest of his life. And of course, he did have disciples as well. But anyway, he had this to say about death. Fearing death, I went to the mountains. Over and over again, I meditated on death's unpredictable coming, and took the strong hold of the deathless, unchanging nature. Now I have lost and gone beyond all fear of dying. So that's the kind of feeling one should aim towards, when our mind has become fully attuned to the Dharma and we've gone beyond any kind of fear. Dagpo Rinpoche is Gampopa, who was Milarepa's student. At first, you should be driven by a fear of birth and death, like a stag escaping from a trap. In the middle, you should have nothing to regret, even if you die, like a farmer who has carefully worked his fields. In the end, you should feel relieved and happy, like a person who has just completed a formidable task. That's the way to die. You've done everything that you could do. You feel at peace with the world. You feel at peace with yourself. Your work in this life has been done, and you can die peacefully, joyfully, ready for what's to come, in the knowledge that you've done everything, you lived well, and you'll be able to die well and live again in whatever lifetime is to come. Now, the next topic is to meditate on others who live and die without thinking of impermanence. What happens if you haven't trained in this? If you haven't developed any understanding, what happens? What has happened to others who have lived and died without really contemplating impermanence and being still kind of under the sway of grasping at life, of the life that you're in, and that you're going to have to let go of, but you're so kind of caught up in it. In fact, if we've not come to any understanding of impermanence and change, then we try to kind of make things stay the same. And that's kind of, this stasis is just death, basically. That is I think that the real death that we talk about isn't actually death in the sense of that's the end, but this kind of stasis would be sort of death, because if everything was stuck, then it would just stagnate. There would be nothing else happening. It would just stagnate. I mean, even stagnation, I suppose, there's something happening. It's still things change. But like, for example, there are people that, have you heard of, what's it called? Cryogenics? There are some people that cling to the life that they're in. They're so fearful of death. I don't know if you've heard of this, but you can Google it. I actually Googled it yesterday because I thought, what would be the opposite then of change? Would be this thing like cryogenics. And there are some people who, at the moment of death, have put in place this plan to get their bodies frozen and stored, so that one day in the future, when science has developed to such a degree that they imagine that they can be woken up, like Sleeping Beauty, be woken up and be still in the same body and not have anything have changed. I mean, this is crazy stuff. It's like it would be like putting a cow in a deep freeze or something, and then expecting in a few years' time you could take it out and just give it a bit of a shock and it would just start running about in the field. But this is the craziness that people do, I mean, some people, of course, to do this kind of particular craziness costs a lot of money. I Googled it yesterday, and it costs $280,000. Of course, it's American dollars. This happens in the States. It seems that there's something called the Cryogenics Institute, who will happily take $280 off you in order to freeze your body and put it in a locker or a deep freeze somewhere. And then at some unspecified time in the future, when science has developed to such a great degree that all this is going to work and you'll come out full of the joys of spring, so, or you can just pay for a head. That's only $880,000. Yeah, it's a snip. I mean, but this is, people have actually parted with, nearly £250,000, to have this done. Crazy. So that's a very extreme example of what can happen if you have no understanding, but you have quite a lot of money and you think that you can control things in that way. It doesn't work like that. So if we see people that do, I mean, that's very extreme, but to see people that do things like that, or that just have no understanding of what's going to happen in the future, and that there is a Bardo, and that there are ongoing lifetimes, and therefore they waste this lifetime. They don't have any understanding of what's to come, and so that their lives can be frittered away. Maybe they're not terrible people or anything, but there's, it's very easy to just be distracted and fritter away life, like we were saying before, everybody needs a bit of escapism now and again, but there's so much temptation to be lost in distraction. You can spend your entire life distracted, or just working for in a worldly way. And of course, we have to earn a living and pay our way in the world, but when that takes over and we have no understanding of anything other than the material, consumer sort of society, and we get trapped in that. It's very, very common. Even though we might not be bad people, but we're not kind of poking our head above the parapet to see how things really are. We're just kind of allowing ourselves to be a bit gullible, and just dragged along by the lowest common denominator, I have to say, because it is very common, that way of being, There's probably a lot more people who are in that trapped in that distraction and world of illusion, the deluded way of seeing things, So we should do everything we can to escape that, to put our head above water and see how things truly are. Look into things deeply, use our intelligence while we have it. So when we rely on the Dharma in this life, then we will be prepared at the time of death, and we'll see it as an opportunity, because it's like a chance to progress. It's like, a bit like a staging post, or a bit like the clearing point. We know if you're about to go to university or somewhere and they have this clearing house, I think the Bardo's a bit like that. And then, depending on how you've done, then you sort of go to wherever it is that you deserve to go to, basically. But it's not in the hands of some examiners. It's in your hands now, because you're the one that create the causes and conditions through your actions, through your karma. So it is in our hands now. And, if we see death as an opportunity, then we're encouraged to live well, and we can also die well. And then when we do die well, our mind will be peaceful, even joyful, like someone who has completed their work and can rest at ease now. We can rest at ease, like when you come home after a good day's work. You've got everything done. You just rest at ease and relax and ready for whatever's to come next. So even in death, we can set a good example for others. And that can inspire others to live similarly and die similarly. So the motivation to benefit others is always there, even in death. Look at the way the Buddha died, The Buddha had gathered his students, the monks and nuns around him, and that was his final teaching, actually. His final teaching was impermanence. Most important teaching. So we can embrace the path of Dharma with our body, our speech, and our mind. And if we only want to use one Dharma practice, let it be impermanence, because you can see with what we've been talking about today how crucial it is, how important it is. And so I think I'd like to read another part of this, because I think what it would be good to do now is to meditate on everything that we've spoken about and absorb it. You can talk and talk and talk, but we've covered the main topics here. We've had a look at what happens at the hour of death and how others have died. We've looked at what happens after death in the Bardo state, and how it is in the Bardo state. And we've looked at how people who live and die without thinking of impermanence, how they would die. So I'd like to read this paragraph from from words of my perfect teacher, and we'll use that as the sort of entry into our meditation. So this is the guidance. I don't need to give guidance because there's much better guidance coming from Patrul Rinpoche. But first, I think you need to straighten up your posture. Check you're sitting well. If you need to have a little stretch first, do so. And just let your mind settle. And we'll start with this guidance or advice from Patrul Rinpoche. So sitting well, let your eyes rest, looking downwards but open. You want to be alert and aware. Let your breathing relax. Use your whole body, not just your lungs, but your diaphragm and your belly. Breathing deeply, breathing fully, naturally. You don't have to make a big effort, just to use your whole body to breathe. So posture, your top of your head reaching upwards, so the vertebrae are aligned and your spine straight but flexible. Eyes resting, open, resting with the attention inwards. And as we settle mind and body, I'll just read this section, this little extract from words of my perfect teacher. Wherever you are, all places are impermanent. So keep the pure Buddha fields in mind. Food, drink, and whatever you enjoy are impermanent. So feed on profound concentration. Sleep is impermanent. So when you are asleep, purify sleep's delusions into clear light. Wealth, if you have it, is impermanent. So strive for the 7 noble riches. They are faith, discipline, learning, generosity, conscientiousness, modesty, and wisdom. Loved ones, friends and family are impermanent. So in a solitary place, arouse the desire for liberation. High rank and celebrity are impermanent. So always take a lowly position. Speech is impermanent. So inspire yourself to recite mantras and prayers. Faith and desire for liberation are also impermanent. So strive to make your commitments unshakable. Ideas and thoughts are impermanent. So work on developing a good nature. Meditative experiences and realizations are impermanent. So go on until you reach the point where everything dissolves in the nature of reality. At that time, the link between death and rebirth falls away, and you reach such confidence that you are completely ready for death. You have captured the citadel of immortality. You are like the eagle, free to soar in the heights of the heavens. Maintaining awareness, contemplate what happens at the hour of death, looking at how others have died. and make it more personal. Reflect on your own death. Use the reflection to motivate your practice of the Dharma and see how that will change the outcome of your life and your death. And let your mind rest. Resting in non-referential, peaceful awareness, spacious and relaxed. And now turn your mind to contemplate what happens after death in the Bardo state. How might that be to experience? relax again, let the mind settle, resting in awareness, clarity. And then meditate on others who have lived and died, or who are now living and will die, without ever thinking of impermanence and death, who are completely unprepared. When we see the likelihood of the suffering they will encounter, then we can cultivate compassion for them and also resolve not to waste our lives and be unprepared for death, but to rely on the Dharma in this life. Living well and dying well. Even in death we can set a good example for others. If we embrace the path of Dharma now in our life, with body, speech and mind, we just do our best. So there we had a little mini practice session, and looked at all the different topics that you need to look at when you're at home. Of course, what we did there was to do them one after another, but what you should do it when in your own practice is, I mean, you can do that, but it's best, especially at the beginning, if you go use the first one, what happens at the hour of death, and you use that for a few days as your practice. So you do your session on that topic, and then maybe after 3 or 4 days you change it to the second one, which is what happens after death in the Bardo state, looking at that in general terms. And what happens when you've got some sort of understanding of it, when you've lived your life and accumulated good karma, what the differences might be in the Bardo state if you have some understanding and have lived your life in that way. And then the third one is to meditate on others who live and die without ever having thought of impermanence and looked at the reality of death and change and impermanence, and what that might be like for them, and how you can use that to spur your own practice, not only for your own sake, but in order to be in a better position to help others as well. So to have that compassion as well, because they don't know how it is, and so you can show others if you know yourself. So those are the topics. Of course, there was the previous 4 topics as well, so which you've already done some practice on. And then I'd just like to say another few words from this wonderful book. More to do with your practice. Where did I see it? Yes, so in that way to generate bodhicitta, you're doing this practice not only for your own benefit, but for the benefit of all beings. So he advises here, start by generating bodhicitta. That should be uppermost in your mind. And as the main practice, train your mind by all the various means we've talked about until impermanence really permeates your every thought. And finally, conclude by sealing the practice with the dedication of merit. And practicing in this way, strive to the best of your ability to emulate the great beings of the past. Use them for your inspiration. There's another one I'd like to... There's so many good things in here. This is a short one. It's... He's saying here, whatever I see of high rank, power, wealth, or beauty in the world arouses no desire in me. That is because, seeing how the noble beings of old spent their lives, I have just a little understanding of impermanence. I have no deeper instruction than this to offer you. This is a very highly enlightened being saying this, but of course he has also modesty and humility. This is one of the main qualities. So, yes, let's dedicate the merit, as he said. So we dedicate to all sentient beings. O sanam di tamche sikpani, topne nyepe dranam pamchene, Jiganachi balatrupai, sipe sole doa sho. And we can also say that in English. By this merit may I obtain omniscience, defeat the enemy wrongdoing, and so free all beings from the ocean of existence, with its stormy waves of birth, aging, sickness, and death. And finally, I'd also like to share this little quote. It kind of brings it right back to here and now, to us in our present state. Impermanence is everywhere, yet I still think things will last. I have reached the gates of old age, yet I still pretend I'm young. Bless me, and misguided beings like me, that we may truly understand impermanence. I certainly identify with that. Maybe you do too, I don't know. But go well with your practice. I wish you all the best. And use these precious topics and Dharma to really shape your life and your death for the better. And then when we meet again, we'll look at the next part, which is karma. So we've got that to look forward to. And karma's always with us, whether we know it or not. So it's in what we do. But in the meantime, you concentrate on the topic in hand and discover everything that you can about it, because you're discovering, it's a voyage of self-discovery, isn't it? You're discovering your own mind. That's what it's about. So thank you for your attention, and see you next time.